Coming up in this episode, we take a look back at a tragic event in the history of the region. The 1949 St. Anthony Hospital fire took the lives of 77 people and changed the community of Effingham.
And then we'll delve into the history of Eastern Illinois University and explore the development of teacher education, or the normal school tradition, here in Illinois.
The odd thing is that most of these normal schools ended up in rural areas, and that's because we needed to have a school close by. Within a 75-mile radius, you could find a normal school. You could be trained, and you could get there, in the week and perhaps get home for the weekend.
That's all coming up next on this historical edition of Heartland Highways. Heartland Highways is made possible in part by EIU's Academy of Lifelong Learning, providing all community members an outlet for their educational, social, and creative pursuits, opportunities to learn new skills, engage in topics of interest, and explore new areas of learning, available for people of all ages. More information available at 581-5114.
Hello, and thanks for joining us for this edition of Heartland Highways. I'm Kate Pleasant.
And I'm Lori Casey. This first story came to us as a suggestion from a viewer.
We're taking a look back at a historical and tragic day in the history of Effingham, Illinois.
In 1949, an event took place that would forever change the community, and that was the St. Anthony Hospital fire. St. Anthony's Memorial Hospital has been a part of the Effingham community since the 1870s, when the first 3 hospital sisters of St. Francis arrived. In less than a year, the community financed and built the first hospital for the sisters, which opened on September 15, 1877. The work of the sisters increased over the years, and additions were made to the hospital in 1889, 1917, and 1924. The sisters provided care for all, regardless of race, religion, or financial status.
If you went to the hospital, everyone was treated the same. As far as I know, it was a safe place to go, or they were good. And the sisters were excellent nurses. I lived directly across the street from St. Anthony. Mm-hmm. And I was very familiar with, I was a teenager, and I a lot of times spent time over there. All the kids did. It was a friendly place to be, and lots of things were going on.
As the only hospital in Effingham County, St. Anthony's was a vital resource that served the medical needs for many area residents. By the 1940s, the building was simply too small to effectively meet the needs of patients, and future plans included building a new hospital in 1951 or 1952. However, that would all change on the night of April 4th, 1949. A fire broke out in what is believed to be the basement, and within minutes the entire structure was engulfed in flames.
Fire was seen from 20 miles away, and 30 people driving on the road saw it. They didn't know what it was, but they reported that. They think it started in the basement room where the laundry facility would have been, and there was a laundry chute that would run from basement to, the second floor, but they call it third level, for them to throw their clothing and sing down. They thought that the fire just went up that and started in the chute. We don't know that, but they had been varnishing the woodwork and cleaning and doing a lot, and they thought maybe some rags with the material was still there and that combusted, but I don't know.
It was an old hospital, and the floors were covered in linoleum, or something that they could keep clean, something that would be cleaned easily, and then they'd wax it, and the same way with the halls, the varnish on the walls and all that. So when it got a good start, there was no stopping it.
People didn't have a chance to get out, most of them. Some of them crawled out windows, some jumped out windows, they broke their backs. They took mattresses from the neighbors to let them fall on the mattress.
And they called in other departments, and I think the only person that had a ladder truck was Matt Toon. So you can imagine how long that time took to get that here. So it was a fire that I don't think anybody had planned for.
A perfect storm of conditions came together: the age of the building, lack of fire doors, and water resources. There were an estimated 134 people in the building at the time, including the sisters, a priest, visitors, nurses, patients, and residents who lived on the third floor of the hospital. In the end, 77 would lose their lives, many from the fire itself and others from injuries sustained while trying to escape.
The first thing that my mother did, and she looked in the newspaper to see the names of the people, because they always put in a list of the patients that were in the hospital. And she wondered, well, it might be somebody she knew. And of course, everybody wanted to go and see, but you couldn't get close, of course, because, well, you can imagine the turmoil that they had around there. It was just a bad, bad day. Everyone wanted to know if there was something that they could do to help. And a lot of there were a lot of things that the townspeople did that came in to help to clean up things and so forth. But it was a horrific time.
In a community like Effingham, it impacted so many people. You had 70 plus people, and you had some that were residents that lived in the hospital full time, and then not only, but workers, you know, the sisters and some of the maintenance guys that were in there, and it just impacted them, and it just set a somber tone, I think, over the town. You know, there's also pictures of the sisters at St. Anthony Church, and you know, with their habits, you know, smoke stained and dirty, having a mass, and the community behind them doing that as well.
The newspapers provided stories of heroes and tragedy, including that of Frank Reese, hospital engineer who lived next door. He went back into the building to save his wife, a patient on the second floor. She was able to escape, but he unfortunately did not survive. Nurse Fern Riley was on duty that night and immediately went to save the infants under her care.
It was an impossible situation where she could get them out. I think, if I remember right, she could have crawled out of a window, maybe taken them one at a time. But there was some kind of a fire escape, but this was impossible for her to do. She couldn't go and come back. So finally, she just stayed with the babies and took care of them.
Nurse Hillary Clements planned on quitting her job at the hospital and was working her last shift the night of the fire. She helped patients out a second-floor window and sustained burns and broken bones trying to escape. She died a few days later in a Granite City hospital. As each day progressed, the number of fatalities reported in local and state newspapers continued to rise. On a national scale, the story made the cover of Life magazine on April 18, 1949. Nationally, laws and statutes for fire prevention and safety were changed as a result of the St. Anthony's fire.
At the time of the fire, it was such a national disaster that the governor of Illinois issued a work request, you might say, for all hospitals in the state of Illinois to be checked. And then from there, it went into a national review. But for the state of Illinois, it was a national fire code. And from that, they really started to develop fire codes as far as smoke walls, fire penetrations, exit signs, alarms, sprinkler systems. It really became more of a a method of when they built new things to how are they going to do that. And what they focused on was the separation, not only vertically in the new building, but horizontally so that there's a way to contain fires.
Through the tragedy, a community came together, and within days of the fire, a fund was established to build a new hospital.
Right after the fire, donations started coming in from throughout not only the United States, but the world, and really is to helping. And at that time, the sisters decided that, they needed the hospital here, and really the community made that decision and what they did. So the community really bonded together and said, we want to rebuild our hospital. And it became our hospital. And I think if you look at some of the things, it's helped build our hospital.
In 1954, a new St. Anthony's Hospital was dedicated with hundreds of area residents in attendance. The hospital added the word memorial to honor those lost in the fire.
They say out of the ashes rose St. Anthony's Memorial Hospital, and I think it just, you drive up to the front and you look at the front entrance, and I think it's just pretty dramatic to see that resulted from that fire.
Since the initial construction, St. Anthony's has expanded, adding services and technology to serve the healthcare needs of the region. While it has been more than 60 years since that tragic night, it's not something to be forgotten. Inside the hospital, Heritage Hallway provides a pictorial history of St. Anthony's. Memorials, newspaper articles, and books have also been written to remember the events and the aftermath of that tragic April night.
I started collecting all of the information that I could about the fire. Any newspapers that we got at home that had stories about it, the Life magazine, any magazine that you came across that had a story about it. So that's what I gathered together and saved to put in a book like we did.
Well, I've been in genealogy and history for years, so it was just interesting. And when Audrey brought those papers in, I thought, oh, we have to do something with these. And in 2 months' time, I had volume 1 put together. And then there was such a demand for it and so many stories. They brought in stories at what they knew, personal stories. Okay, we've got to do volume 2. 30 days, I had another book put together.
At the St. Anthony Cemetery, a headstone was donated by the Hospital Foundation in remembrance of those bodies that remained unclaimed from the fire. For years, the only photos of that April night and the aftermath were black and white images. Unknown to anyone at the time, Louis Dupre, a professional photographer from Effingham, took a series of color images the night of the fire and the following day. Nobody knew they even existed until Dupre's son Lou contacted the hospital in 2006 and donated 28 color slides. These images clearly show the extent of the fire that night and the devastation the following morning. Another important legacy from that night is the fire truck Caledonia. It was the first truck out of the station on the night of the fire. Now fully restored by volunteers from the fire department, the truck makes appearances at parades and other community events.
When the hospital burnt, it was the first truck out of the station, but the hydrant on the corner didn't work. So the truck went to the next block to catch the hydrant, and it shuttled water into the other engine that came, which would have been engine 5, I think. And so it just pumped water into the fire. So most of the hospital fire pictures, you don't see the truck because it was a block away. Kept it for a while. It got sold to Edgewood Fire Department. It was there for a while. We got it back and went over to Ben Winter's museum for a while. And then a bunch of us guys, of course we were all new guys at that time, took an interest in it and decided we'd refurb it, and that was about a 9-year process. If you look at it now, it's hard to explain what it looked like unless you'd seen it. It was all faded. These were all painted over. It had been painted more than once. It was just the gauges were all water stained and stuff. Those got refurbed. It was in a pretty bad condition.
The story of this important piece of Effingham history will continue to be told and remembered in many ways.
I think we talk about it more than what we used to. And it used to be a topic that nobody really talked about, but again, it became so much of our history here at St. Anthony's. And as a result of the fire, how the community grew, but how we as colleagues at the hospital, that is part of our history. I think it's getting harder and harder to do because that generation, we see fewer of them, and the next generation and the younger generation, it's one of those that you need to make sure you pass on and you share what happened and why the name, and we've got to continue to share that story.
If you'd like to purchase a copy of any Heartland Highways program, contact us at 1-877-727-9348 during regular business hours. You can also visit our online store at weiu.net or mail in your order with payment to the address on your screen. DVDs are available for $25 each. Visa, MasterCard, Discover, or American Express are accepted. Just let us know what show you're interested in by mentioning the story name or person featured in the show.
Next, we look back into the history of Eastern Illinois University and the development of the normal school tradition in Illinois. Desks, chalkboards, books, and school lunches. All reminders that education is one common experience we all share. For those teachers who taught us to read and write, how did they learn to become educators? Prior to colleges and universities, teacher training was a simplified and informal system.
Anyone with a bit of education had more than others, and therefore they could become the teacher. And so there wasn't a really formal training. If you attended school for a few years, you knew about what the teacher knew. And so then you became the teacher as they moved on. Until up into the 20th century, we had teachers with extremely small amounts of formal preparation. They knew how to read, they knew how to do the arithmetic, and they had some grasp of other subjects. And these one-room schools, of which there were thousands of them in our state alone, may have only had 8 to 10 students in the classroom, and they were all different levels.
A movement to formalize teacher training in the U.S. started in the East in the 1820s. Education reformers like Horace Mann advocated for the need to establish norms for teacher training. Schools quickly sprang up all across the country. Here in Illinois, the first state-funded normal school was established in 1857 at Illinois State University.
That institution in Illinois helped give a focal point to where teachers might get training and where presidents of other colleges and institutions were trained.
Following Illinois State came Southern Illinois at Carbondale, Eastern Illinois at Charleston, Northern Illinois at DeKalb, and Western Illinois at Macomb.
The odd thing is that most of these normal schools ended up in rural areas, and that's because we needed to have a school close by. Within a 75-mile radius, you could find a normal school. You could be trained, and you could get there, in the week and perhaps get home for the weekend.
Cities competed to be the chosen location for these colleges, and Eastern was no exception.
In the archives, we have a telegram that was sent from Springfield on the day that the vote was taken, and it was after 12 ballots, I guess, they finally narrowed it down to Charleston. So it took about 4 years from that point to get the building built, and the school opened in 1899 as Eastern Illinois State Normal School.
Livingston C. Lord was chosen to be the first president to lead the campus, a post he held until 1933. He strived to create an atmosphere of learning both in and out of the classroom. He held strongly to personal ideals of punctuality, neatness, and not smoking in public. Believing education should play a dominant role in a person's life, he remained a lifelong teacher and learner. Students who came to Eastern in the early days could be granted admission even without a high school diploma.
And they would take some preparatory training, and then they might be here 2 or 3, 4 years to get the amount of training they needed to at least begin a career as a teacher. Some of them would go back later and get more education.
Just 1 year after the school opened, Eastern graduated their first class of teachers. But those early classes earned diplomas and not academic degrees.
The first bachelor's degree wasn't awarded until 1922. So it went all those years they gave out diplomas or sort of like teacher certificates, indicating that people had completed certain training programs and were qualified to be teachers in the elementary schools or in some cases the high schools.
In addition to coursework, most normal schools used on-campus model or laboratory schools to help their students apply their knowledge in a real classroom setting.
Here at Eastern, we had Blair Hall, and then later we had the laboratory school in Buzzard Hall, and each one of the normal schools in Illinois had those training facilities, and they were replaced over the years, some more than others, some quicker than others, but it gave these budding teachers places to ply their trade before they were truly responsible for everything that was happening in their schools.
What they called critic teachers. That would be like the person who was in charge of the classroom, the experienced teacher. And it's a classroom of third graders. And there's a little boy that's reciting, doing recitation, they called it. And then in the background, there's a group of 4 or 5 normal school students who are observing the class and how the experienced teacher teaches the class. And then, they would in turn then take their turn teaching the students. So that's a really evocative picture because it sort of shows the whole purpose of what the school is about.
As the school changed, so did its name, from the original Eastern Illinois State Normal School to Eastern Illinois State Teachers College.
Even though we think of it as a fairly big school now, it has its roots in a small school tradition. And probably everybody knew one another for decades. You come here, and after a few months being here, you'd know everybody, and so it was a real family type situation that the students experienced,
After World War II, the college changed names again, dropping the word teachers, which reflected the addition of other degree offerings. The first master's degree in education was awarded in 1952, and in 1957, the school made a final name change to Eastern Illinois University.
So it really retained the flavor of being an education institution solely for many, many, many decades. And still today, it's one of the main emphases at Eastern is on the education college and training of teachers. I mean, there are many other things here now, but that's still one of the largest departments.
Today, there are 7 undergraduate degrees and 8 graduate degrees offered by EIU's College of Education and Professional Studies. Eastern's history as a teacher's college is still evident today. Blair Hall, which once served as Eastern's first model school, still stands right next to Old Main. Buzzard Hall, a laboratory school up until the 1970s, is the home of the College of Education and Professional Studies. From their first graduating class of 4 students back in 1900, Today, Eastern awards about 3,000 degrees every year and continues their tradition of training the future educators of tomorrow.
Watch Heartland Highways online anytime. Check us out on youtube.com/WEIUTV. Once you're there, just look for the Heartland Highways playlist, which will take you to a list of full episodes from seasons 9 through 12. And if you subscribe to our channel, you'll automatically be notified of when new programs are available to view. So sign up today.
We're out of time for this episode of Heartland Highways.
Thanks for watching, and remember, you can get more Heartland Highways anytime on our YouTube page at youtube.com/WEIUTV.
See you next time on Heartland Highways, where every mile is an adventure.
Heartland Highways is made possible in part by EIU's Academy of Lifelong Learning, providing all community members an outlet for their educational, social, and creative pursuits. Opportunities to learn new skills, engage in topics of interest, and explore new areas of learning. Available for people of all ages. More information available at 581-5114.